Hello friends and welcome to the channel. In this video we will be covering Dragonsong's Reprise Ultimate Phase 6, which is the Double Dragon phase. And without wasting any more time, let's just dive right in. This phase consists of two bosses, Nidhogg and Hraelsvega. The group should split into two light parties here to split the damage between the two dragons, as we want to keep their HP percentage as even as possible for a future mechanic that requires them to be more or less than 3% within HP percentage of each other. Our first mechanic is breaths. Nidhogg will randomly send out 3 fire tethers to the healers and DPS, while Hraelsvega will do the same but with ice tethers. For this set of breaths, these tethers need to intercept each other to cancel out the debuff that they give. Otherwise, you will suffer a debuff and die. If you die to any mechanic Hraelsvega does, it will enrage him, causing him to gradually one-shot every player one by one, resulting in a wipe. So it is imperative that we get this mechanic right. To intercept these tethers with each other, we will want to make a straight line from the south with 3 fixed players standing still, a melee, a ranged, and a healer. The remaining melee, ranged, and healer will be flex players and will pair their tethers with their partners accordingly. This isn't too complicated. In an ideal world, we could pair the healer with the healer, the range with the range, and the melee with the melee. But sometimes this won't always be flawless, as the two melee could both be targeted by fire, which means the flex melee would have to adjust and find another spot with an ice tether with one of the other fixed players. Meanwhile, the other flexer, maybe a ranged in this case, will see that and adjust to the melee adjuster accordingly. Additionally, these tethers must be slightly extended away from their respective dragon to avoid the proximity-based damage. You can identify this by looking at the tether on you. If it is purple, it is close and will kill you. Extend the tether until this purple effect goes and returns to its original color, orange or blue. Be aware this also applies to your partner, so don't be too close to your partner's tether either, or it will kill you due to the proximity-based damage. As for the tanks, look at your respective dragon's mouth and identify if it is glowing or not. If the mouth is glowing, rotate your camera to your co-tank's dragon and identify if that is also glowing. If they are both glowing, then both tanks should stack middle for a shared tank buster. But if only one of the heads is glowing, then that glowing head will do a cleave throughout the middle of the arena, making it unsafe. And the dragon that isn't glowing will do a single tank buster on the tank that is tanking that dragon. Both tanks should go north and then to the intercardinal of their respective dragon, while avoiding the clearly visible AoE indicator. This single target tank buster is a massive AoE around that tank that will knock back and kill any player close enough to be hit. This is why both tanks split off to their respective dragon. After breaths, Nidhogg will cast Mortal Vow. This will target a random DPS player and do a splash AoE around them, granting the targeted player a debuff which they must pass to one other player every 34 seconds. If someone who isn't the targeted player gets caught by the initial Mortal Vow splash AoE, they will suffer a separation stack which will render them vulnerable to a follow-up mechanic, effectively killing them. Additionally, this separation stack will also be applied if more than 2 players are in the stack to pass, so make sure these passes are between 2 players each time. After passing Mortal Vow, you will be granted another debuff, which means you cannot take another Mortal Vow throughout the duration of this phase, so make sure to exclude yourself from following passes. But we do have a system for this. It goes like this: DPS to tank, tank to tank, tank to DPS, and then finally DPS to DPS. The final pass can easily be communicated between the DPS players, so do not stress about that. Our next mechanic is Akh Afah. This will target both healers and they must stack with 3 other party members. So the idea here is to have 2 light parties between the 2 healers. Just use the standard light parties that you've used throughout the duration of this fight and you'll be fine. This does hit relatively hard, so do make sure that you are popping mitigations for this. And also, this is exactly why we need to keep Nidhogg and Hraelsvega between 3% of each other. If they are not between 3% of each other, they will tether to each other, and this is going to kill both of the parties outright if that tether remains. So if you do see a tether between the dragons, a purple one for Nidhogg and a white one for Hraelsvega, then make sure to burn them down during this mechanic and get their HP between 3% of each other and just even them out from there, because you do not want to wipe to this. It's the worst feeling ever. So do just make sure your DPS is on point and keeping the HP between these 2 dragons at a pretty equal level. Our next mechanic is Hallowed Wings. First, look at Hell's Vega and see which of his wings is lit up in this blue-like effect. The side that is lit up is going to be a massive cleave AoE on that portion of the arena, so you must dodge to the other side, left or right. Meanwhile, Hell's Vega will either keep his head down or he will raise his head. If he keeps his head in a normal position, which we deem head down, it means that tanks should go close to Hell's Vega while the group should go far. This is because Hell's Vega is going to do 2 position tank busters on the 2 closest targets to him. So this is why if the head is down, the group needs to go far and the tanks need to go close. If the head is raised up, however, the tanks need to go far and the group need to be close. Because if the head is raised up, this means the 2 tank busters are now going to target the 2 furthest away players. Meanwhile, Nidhogg will disengage from the arena and do a dive bomb from either the north or the south side of the arena, and he is either going to be diving the west or east side of the arena. Pan your camera around the map and look for Nidhogg. Once you have found Nidhogg and you can see where he is diving, you now have your safe quadrant. There is only 1/4 of the map during this mechanic that is safe, but it's quite easy to identify, as you can see in the footage. Once you have finished the first Hallowed Wings, make sure that your Mortal Vow is being passed on a convenient spot. We like to pass the Mortal Vow on the waymark that was the safe quadrant during the Hallowed Wings mechanic. Our next mechanic is Wroth Flames. Nidhogg is going to put a series of debuffs on 6 players. Meanwhile, 2 other players will get nothing, but we'll go into these debuffs in a moment. First, let's focus on the current mechanic which we are facing. These Fire Orbs and Akh Morn. We're going to treat these fire orbs like lanes. We're going to look for the first set of fire orbs, which we deem lane 1. We then see the second set of fire orbs, which we deem lane 2, and then the third set of fire orbs, which we deem lane 3. We want to go towards lane 3 and then dodge into lane 1 or 2, but the movement stays pretty much the same. All we want to do is look for lane 3. Meanwhile, Hell's Vega will also do exactly what Nidhogg did during Hallowed Wings. He's going to take a north or south position, and he's either going to dive the entirety of the west or east side of the map. So we need to do 2 things here. We need to look for lane 3 of the orbs, and we also need to look for Hell's Vega, because this is going to dictate if we're going to go close to Nidhogg or far away from Nidhogg. Once we have found lane 3, we are going to go into the corner of that lane, back up tightly for Akh Morns, and prepare mitigations here, because this is a series of 4 attacks. For each Akh Morn, it's going to leave a puddle, and this puddle is going to give you a bleed effect if you linger in it, resulting in a wipe because it will kill you with this debuff, which is going to kill the rest of the party as well. Our movement is pretty much always the same regardless of orb order. We're always going to go to lane 3 here, stack in the corner, take first Akh Morn, move forward, and we're going to stop in front of the first bleed puddle here. Once the second Akh Morn has gone offload, we're going to continue to run and make a curve-like movement here. Then we're going to proceed to the middle of the map. Once we've successfully done our Akh Morns, we want to look at Nidhogg and see what he is casting. If he is casting Hot Tail, that means he's going to do a line AoE throughout the middle of the arena, directly where he's facing. So we need to dodge out from the middle, preferably not the side which we just came from, but the opposite side. Although this is quite self-explanatory, it's just going to be a natural dodge for you anyway, you won't have to think about that too much. However, if Nidhogg does Hot Wing, this means we're going to have to go inside the middle of the arena, as he's going to do 2 massive line AoEs to the sides of the arena, so the middle in this case is safe. Now let's rewind to the start of Wroth Flames, where we got all these debuffs, because these require a separate explanation. These 4 black debuffs are on completely random players, and these are spread AoEs. You cannot clip anyone else with these or they will die, and you will wipe the raid, because if anyone dies with these debuffs, it's going to make a domino effect and kill everyone. Meanwhile, these 2 white debuffs on 2 players, which again are completely random, is a stack marker that requires another player, so a partner in this case. This is where the 2 players who didn't get targeted by any debuff are going to stack with those white debuffs. Now, how do we dictate where everyone goes during this mechanic once we have safely avoided the Akborns and the Hot Tail or Hot Wing? What we do is we mark all the black debuffs from 1 to 4, and with 1 being the very closest to Nidhogg, right at the wall, and 4 being the furthest away from Nidhogg, preferably next to Hellsvega's hitbox. Meanwhile, the 2 players with the white debuff and the 2 players that didn't get anything are going to be marked with target to ignore and target to bind. The 2 target to ignore players are going to stack all the way into the wall by Hellsvega, while the target to bind players are going to stack also by Hellsvega, but not right into the wall. Now, of course, these marks don't just come from anywhere. You're going to have to manually do that yourself. Now, the 1 to 4 way marks, which I personally do in our clears, aren't needed. You can kind of YOLO these black marks if you so wish, but it does help keep the consistency if you have 1 player doing this. Meanwhile, our dancer in this group actually did the target to bind and target to ignore for the 2 white debuff players and the 2 players who got nothing. So if you have 2 players who want to volunteer and mark people with macros, then this is a viable solution to keep this mechanic very safe and tidy. After the entirety of the Wroth Flames mechanic, make sure that we're doing the tank to tank pass, preferably in the middle, but tanks just communicate this between each other so you know where you're going. And then Nidhogg and Hellsvega will do another Akh Afah, same deal as the last one, just keep their HP even and you'll be fine. After that, it's going to be another Hallowed Wings, but this time, instead of Nidhogg flying away, Nidhogg is going to do either a Hot Wing or a Hot Tail. So honestly, this one's a little bit easier to do. Again, make sure you're paying attention to Hellsvega here, paying attention to the side of the wing that is glowing, and if his head is down or up, because this is what the tanks are going to need to adjust accordingly to. How we do this is we have 1 tank always in the middle, never adjusting, and then we have the other tank be the adjuster. So this other tank who is the adjuster is either going to go close to Hellsvega if the head is down, or far away from Hellsvega if the head is up. And if it is Hot Wings, then go inside the middle of the arena, but pay attention here to where Hellsvega's wings are glowing, because only one side of the middle here is going to be safe. So just make sure that you are safely positioning yourself within the middle of the arena here and not getting hit by that Hallowed Wings, because if you do get hit by that Hallowed Wings, it's going to result in a wipe because it's going to kill you, and then Hellsvega is going to enrage and just one-shot people one by one again. After the second Hallowed Wings, there will be another pass, this time from a tank to a DPS. So make sure that you are doing that yet again in the middle of the arena. Next up, we have the second set of breaths here, and this time it's slightly different, but the concept is kind of the same here. Make sure that you are extending the tether so it is not purple and will not kill you. Drag it to the opposite side of the dragon that you're tethered to, but this time don't intercept the tethers with each other. It's quite simple. Just drag the tethers far away from the opposite dragon and do not intercept yourself with an opposite tether color. Now we do a interesting strategy for this, and it honestly works pretty damn well. We have one player always north here, regardless of what tether they have, and this player should either be a healer, or if you have a black mage in your party, maybe make it the black mage instead. Meanwhile, the south players, again, just extend that tether, be on the opposite side of the dragon that you're tethered to, do not intercept anyone else, and you can kind of pre-position for this ready, and you can kind of just adjust yourself accordingly to the players around you. There isn't really a priority system whatsoever here. Just kind of pick a spot, make sure you're not getting hit by another player's tether, and everything is fine. It's actually that simple. As for the north player, you're gonna have to pay a little bit of attention here, because you're gonna have to pay attention to what tank has the tank buster, or if there isn't a tank with a tank buster, you won't have to pay attention at all. So if both heads are glowing at this point, both tanks are gonna stack in the middle just like normal. If only one head is glowing, then both tanks are gonna go north and then to their respective intercardinal of the dragon they are tanking, and make sure to communicate this with the north player. So if I had the tank buster, for instance, I should say that I have the tank buster. Maybe I'll say my name has tank buster. That means this north player could slightly inch to the other side where the tank without taking the tank buster goes, so they aren't hit by the tank buster, resulting in a death to them for no reason other than they just didn't know. So just a nice little thing you can do here as a tank, just communicate it with that north player so they are fully aware of what is happening. Our final mechanic is Cauterize. Both the dragons will disengage from the arena for a split second, go to the north and start casting Cauterize here. This is a dive bomb and it's like a wild charge. If you don't know what that means, it means tanks need to be in front to take a tank buster and the rest of the group needs to be behind the tank. In any order, it doesn't matter. Now you need to go to the dragon that you have the opposite debuff to. So if you have Pyretic, you need to go to Hellsvega. If you have the ice debuff, however, you need to go to Nidhogg. So this will cancel out that debuff. If you have the ice debuff, you are fully allowed to continue to move and hit the bosses. If you have Pyretic, you need to stay still. You need to stop moving. If you move during Pyretic, you will just flat out die as the damage is just too much and it will kill you. As for the tanks, make sure the tanks just take any dragon. It doesn't matter here. How we do it is we just take any dragon, which is the side of the dragon that we've been tanking the entire time. So it's random if this is Nidhogg or Hellsvega. Even though I personally tank Nidhogg through the entirety of the fight, if Hellsvega ends up on my side, I'll still just take the charge from Hellsvega. It doesn't make a difference to us tanks. We do, however, really need to make sure that we have our invulnerability during this point because it deals an obnoxious amount of damage. You can mitigate this via the usage of cooldowns, not something I've personally done yet. So right now I'll have to advise to use your invulnerabilities. Once that mechanic has resolved, every party member needs to go tightly to the wall here because Nidhogg and Hellsvega are going to land and they're going to do a proximity-based AoE on the entire party. So the closer you are to them, the more damage you're going to take. Tanks can get away with this, however, because they have their invulnerability up, but the rest of the party needs to go to the wall so they are not taking more damage than necessary. Both of the tanks will suffer a dot debuff on them, so they must be kept healed throughout the duration of this portion of the fight. This dot does deal heavy damage, so make sure the tanks are topped up. There will be another pass here, and what my group does is the 2 DPS that need to pass stay by the wall, and everyone else will move off the wall as soon as Nidhogg and Hellsvega has landed. During this point, the 2 dragons will cast Revenge of the Horde, and this is their enraged cast, so you must kill them within this time to reach the next phase. If you do not kill them, they will wipe you. Once you have successfully killed both of the dragons, you will be greeted into the intermission phase. Everyone else can pretty much AFK, but the healers need to heal through bleed effects here, so make sure that your healers are on point. It's just a few AoE heals, nothing too difficult. There'll be one initial bleed for 5 seconds. Forden will come down and then he'll cast a bleed on everyone for 10 seconds. Now, after this bleed effect, you want to pop your mitigations. So as soon as this bleed effect is over, you want your raid-wide mitigations from your ranged DPS, your tanks, and your healers. So make sure you're getting all of that out in anticipation to take this raid buster on the group. It does deal very high damage, so do make sure that you're not missing anything. After you have took this damage, Forden is going to come back down as Dragon King Forden, and that is the beginning of phase 7, and that is unfortunately why I'm going to have to end the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, please do make sure to give it a like. If you have any feedback for me whatsoever, do leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear your feedback, or just let me know how you're finding the fight, whatever works. If you enjoy the content and you aren't subscribed yet, then please do consider hitting subscribe, as that really does help me a bunch. And without further delay and dragging this video on any further than it needs to, I will end it here. So I'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, make sure to take it easy, stay safe, we out, goodbye.